I've been building a Frugal homestead off-grid for going on 5 years now. About a week ago, I picked up this Frugal horse trailer. It's a dual tandem. Turns out the floor's decent. I had to do some welds and some improvements, and I'm going to show you how far I've come so far. I'm finally starting to run some flux cord beads that are, I don't know what you would say, recognizable as welds. The beginning of this weld, I was too far away, and I realized that, and once I got closer, the rest of the bead is decent. I set up this angle iron, 2 pieces together, and ground them down to give myself a decent starting point for a little practice. Then I went out to the trailer, and there was some really thin steel, so that didn't turn out pretty, but I did, I was able to weld it closed, and that's all that matters. But there's this larger gap here, and I was able to run a decent bead here. I think the bead was decent, but it's such a large gap, I had to run another bead on top of that bead. I think I'm getting the hang of this, and in fact I can see worse welds right here in frame. Let me show you real fast what I really like about this DP200 from YesWelder. You can see that we're using steel, right? And depending on what type of welding you do, you could select a different type of metal. This is flux cord, so you pretty well want to stick to steel. This is the size of the wire. You can select that and change the size that you're running. And most importantly, right here, because I was welding about 1/8 inch thick steel, I went up to 1/8 inch, and I have much more 14 gauge around, but when I did the really thin metal, I went clear down to 20 gauge and was able to weld this really thin metal without burning too many holes in it. It has memory, so you can save settings, and see when you select the type of welding. So in example, I'm doing flux cord welding, right? So just select flux cord welding and then select the thickness of metal that you're going to be welding, and the setting is automatic. You see 197 for wired feed per second, and volts is at 0, 16.5 volts, 48 amps. These settings are automatic, and if you wanted to change, for instance, down to 20 gauge, you see the settings are automatically different and set to what would most likely be an ideal setting for that gauge of steel. I have welded all kinds of stuff on my homestead since I've been out here, going on 5 years now. I've made gates, I've even welded T-posts together. Apparently I don't have quite enough juice with this system to run the stick welder, so I'll stick to flux for now, which I'm learning to do better and better. The weld that I just ran, I think that a highly skilled welder could tell you, yeah, this guy's starting to get the idea. I know that it's ugly, it's easy to say that it's ugly, but is it fusing the 2 pieces of metal together? Yeah. And is it far better than the spot welds I could do recently? Yeah, I'm starting to figure out how to run a bead with this welder, and you can too. I'll put a link down below so you can check it out. Heirloom non-GMO goji berry seeds were sent in by Brenda, and my saddle was damaged, so I needed most of all some needles for sewing the saddle. And here's an entire kit here with special string and whatnot, just for sewing leather. When I bought the trailer, the previous owner told me that the floor needed replaced, and I didn't doubt him one bit. It's a 1966 trailer, and when looking inside, there was some kind of rubber thrown down to keep the floor maybe covered and whatnot, some old OSB. And so I was just planning on replacing that floor. So quickly after getting the trailer, I ripped everything out, and I realized, you know, although the stuff that was on top of the floor is pretty nasty, the floor itself is really in pretty good repair. The previous owner said the lights worked fine for him, but from what I gather, he's had it parked for 10 years, and just looking at the harness, I needed a different harness anyway, and the wiring was pretty nasty underneath the trailer. I just didn't even want to mess with it, so I just ran new wires to the lights, which look like they're in decent shape. The old OSB was nasty, so I burned it, and I ground down the frame to make a nice ground. I'm just waiting on bearings for the trailer, and once I get my new fence up, then I'll go ahead and spring for a truck bed liner to line the trailer just like I did my van about 5 years ago.